Okay, hi guys. This is going to be a video for help on parabolas, as requested. So this is a target, like pretty much exactly like the one you guys have on your target, just a different form. So I'm going to use this to demonstrate to you guys and hopefully clear up some misconceptions. Okay, so we have two generic forms for parabolas. The way we're learning conics right now, we have the equation. X and H are always going to go together. Y and K are always going to go together. And then we have okay, so the things that we know about these equations. We know from Algebra 2 that a parabola is any type of equation where x is squared. So you'll want to notice the equation on the left. When the x term is square, that's the parabola that you know and love. Okay, that's a parabola that's either going to open up or it's going to open down. Okay, so hopefully that should help you remember that, right? You've only ever known x squared your whole life. Okay, so when x is squared, that's the parabola that you're most familiar with. And then your equation on the left, when y is squared, that means your parabola is either going to open to the right or to the left. Okay. The up and the down, the right or the left, comes to you from this guy right here. Your coefficient P, yes, the 4P, but it's mostly just the P. When your coefficient P is positive and you're looking at your x squared equation, when P is positive, that means your parabola is going to open up. When P is negative, that means your parabola is going to open down, okay? Vice versa, when you're over here and you're looking at your y squared, when P is positive, that means your parabola is going to open to the right. When P is negative, that means that your parabola is going to open to the left, okay? And then, again, other ways to help you remember this generic formula. The H and the K is always going to be the center or the vertex, whatever type of shape we're looking at. And the H is always going to go with X, though K is always going to go with Y. So yeah, let's get started. So we're looking at number one. Its equation is 4 times x minus 6 equals y plus 3 squared. So I'm going to quickly jot down what the generic form would look like. That way I can kind of match up my pieces and know what's what. So some things that I know right off the bat from looking at the equation, I know that the parabola is either going to open left or right because I know that the y is squared. And then I'm going to check this coefficient right here since it's positive. I know that my parabola is going to open to the right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to its vertex. So I'm going to find the vertex, which should be at positive 6, negative 3. Remember to flip the sign on both of those. So 6, negative 3. And then I know that the parabola opens to the right. So I'm just going to do a rough sketch to the right. Okay. So now, identify the vertex. We did that. That's just H and K. Flip those signs, and then you're good to go. So now, our other pieces of our graph, we've got our focus and our directrix. Okay, our focus and our directrix are both based off the variable P. So we know in the equation that there's a magic 4. Don't ask me where the 4 came from. I'm not an old mathematician, so I don't know how they derived this formula, but the 4 exists. And so that means that when we're looking at the 4 in this equation, that this 4 is taking the place of 4P, meaning that 4P in this equation equals 4. So then I would have to solve to figure out what P is. So I divide both sides by 4, and now I know that P equals 1. P is really important for finding the focus and the directrix because P is the distance from the vertex to the focus and from the focus to the directrix. Okay, so that means that the vertex is equidistant in between the focus and the directrix. So what I'm going to do, I know that my focus is always going to be inside the parabola. Okay, so if you think of the parabola as a bowl of cereal, the focus is always going to be that cereal. Okay, no matter what direction that it opens, the focus is always inside the bowl of cereal. So that means that in this case right now, if my parabola opens to the right, I'm going to go 1 to the right, and that's going to be my focus. So the focus is just a dot, just a coordinate point. I'm going to say 7, -3. My directrix, I'm going to go 1 in the opposite direction. So I'm going to go back 1, and then I'm going to draw my asymptote-like line. So here's my directrix. Remember, a horizontal line is always y equals, if you want to jot that down somewhere. So a horizontal line is always y equals. A vertical line is always x equals. So this is a vertical line. We're going to say x equals, and then it goes through +5. So that is my directrix. So remember, if the y term is square and it opens left or right, that means your directrix is going to be vertical. If it is a x squared and the parabola opens up or down, then your directrix will be horizontal. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So we're going to write the transformational form of each parabola. That is this form up here with the 4p, and it's separated like this. So we're given our vertex and we're given our focus. The first thing I would do is I would convert this to a decimal. Maybe you're really good with fractions. For me, it's a lot easier to like plot it on a graph and see what I'm looking for if I actually just simplify that in a calculator. So I know that for my transformational form, I need to know P and I need to know my vertex. So knowing my vertex is great, but I need to establish what that distance P is. So what I recommend doing is visualizing it on a graph. I'm going to graph my vertex 8, -4, so it's somewhere right here. And then I'm going to graph my focus, okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to tell me how my parabola is oriented, and it's also going to give me that distance P. So if this was 8, -4, and I need to plot 8.25, -4, that's going to be right here. So now that I know that my parabola is to the right, now that I know that my focus is to the right of the vertex, I now know that the vertex opens to the right. So knowing that I can't talk this morning. Knowing that the parabola opens to the right tells me that y is squared, and it also tells me that P is going to be positive since it opens to the right. So we know our vertex. We know it's going to be y squared. We know that P is going to be positive, and then we need to know what that value P is. So what is the distance from the vertex to the focus? The distance is 0.25 or 1/4. And then that's all I need to know. I'm going to plug that into my equation. So I know that since y is the one that's squared, I know the 4p is going to go with the x. And I know that this is going to be the squared term. And so now I'm just going to plug in the values that I know. I know that p is 1/4. I know that my vertex is 8, -4. And I know that P needs to stay positive. So when I clean it up, 4 times 1/4 is just 1. You don't have to write the 1. You can if you want to. Just a pro tip on the target, if there's ever a coefficient 1, I did not type it in the answer key. I've tried to go back and update the answer keys, but like if this was the question on the target on the Google form, the answer key would look like this, and if you wrote the 1, it would mark you wrong. I will go back and I will make sure that it's correct, and I will mark it correct for you guys. But just beware of that if there's ever a coefficient 1 or a -1, you should just have a negative, okay? Otherwise, it will be picky like that. But I will always go back and make sure you guys get correct credit for anything that you did correctly, even if it got it wrong. Okay, moving on to number 3. Number 3, we are given our focus and our directrix, so we need to use this information to establish what our vertex is. And then once we know our vertex, because we have the focus and the directrix, it should reveal what that distance P is. And then once we know how our parabola is oriented, then we can draw the equation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph these guys. -10, -6. Let's say that's somewhere over here. And then my directrix is at -4. Remember, y equals is a horizontal line. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line through -4. So we know that from the vertex, you go P in one direction, you get your focus. You go P in the other direction, you get your directrix. Meaning that the vertex is equidistant in between the focus and the directrix. Okay, so if this is your directrix and this is your focus, your vertex should be smack dab in the middle of those two things. Okay, another fact, your vertex and your focus are always in line with each other. So depending on how the parabola is oriented, they're either going to have the same x coordinate or the same y coordinate. Looking at what we have, since the directrix is above the focus, we know that our parabola is going to open down, okay? The directrix is always behind the parabola. So if the parabola opens up, the directrix will be below. If the parabola opens to the right, directrix will be to the left. So the directrix being above the focus means that our parabola is going to open down. So if the directrix is at -4 and the focus is at -6, and that means the point smack dab in the middle is where our vertex is going to lie. So if our focus was at -10, -6, then our directrix, our vertex is going to have the same x coordinate because they're going to be in line. And then its y coordinate is -5 because it's right in the middle. And then again, I know that it opens down. So I've got my vertex. I need to know, well, I know that P is going to be negative because my parabola opens down. I need to know what P is in general. And so I want to look, what is the distance from the vertex to the focus or the vertex to the directrix? In this case, it's just 1. And then we know that because it's an up or down parabola, that x is going to be the term that's squared. So we'll plug it all in. The 4p is going to be with the y term. And then the x is going to be squared. Remember, the p always lives with the term that's not squared. Also, there is no wrong way to do it. If you wrote like x minus h squared and then you did the 4p on the right, honestly, I think the 4p on the right is what the notes taught you, but I'm just trying to match the way the target was written. Either way is fine. They're both correct, and you'll get credit for whichever direction you write it on the answer key. But yeah, so let's plug this stuff in. I've got P is 1, y plus 5, x plus 10 squared. And then that last bit of information, I know that my p-value needs to be negative because the parabola opens down. So I'm going to come back down here, and I know that it's -4, y plus 5, and then x plus 10 squared. And then our last but not least, this is going to be a completing the square problem, and it's actually going to be easier than completing the square because you don't have to do it twice. You only have to do it once. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the terms that aren't going to be a part of completing the square. So because the x term is squared, that means that everything with an x is going to get put in the completing the square, and that everything else has to go. So I'm going to subtract this over to the other side, add this over to the other side. That way these cancel out. and I've got x squared plus 4x equals negative y plus 5. So now I'm going to go through and I'm actually going to complete the square. I want to know what to put right there because we're looking for something that looks like this. We're looking for an ax squared plus bx plus c. That way we can factor it really nicely. Remember, to get this term c, it is always going to be half of b and then square that number. Okay, so in this situation, my b is 4, half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4 again, and then whatever I put on the left side, I have to put on the right side as well. So now as I go to clean this up, I've got x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals negative y plus 9. And so now I'm going to factor the quadratic on the left. So again, you shouldn't have to think very long or hard for what these numbers are because you created it. Everything comes back to that b divided by 2 number. You could, in theory, write it out as x plus 2 times x plus 2, because 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4. But remember, that's not what we're looking for. We're in the hopes that it's going to end up looking like this form again, meaning that we don't want to see an x plus 2 times x plus 2. We want to see an x plus 2 squared, because we know that anything times itself is the same thing as just taking that thing and squaring it. And of course, that's going to get us closer to our formula that we're looking for. The biggest thing you need to know right here is that in your generic formula, the x and the y are always plain terms, okay? They never have a negative or a coefficient with them. So while it's very tempting to say that you're done, the left or the right side of your equation looks good, unfortunately, you need to factor out this negative from the y. So you need to pull a negative 1 out, which is inevitably going to flip the sign. Oops, I literally just said it and then I didn't do it. It's going to flip the sign on the 9. If you divide a negative 1 out of both terms, the y becomes positive and the 9 becomes negative. And then again, remember, if there's a coefficient 1, you should get in the habit of not writing it. Again, I think I've updated all of the answer keys to not mark it wrong if you put the 1, but I might have missed one and that might explain it. So if you do a target and you get one wrong and it's because you wrote a 1 positive or negative somewhere, just correct it and see if the target corrects itself. But this is going to be my final answer right here. So yeah, that's parabolas. I hope this was helpful. I can do this for all of the upcoming lessons just in case you guys, aren't getting it from the video alone, especially since, these targets are exactly what you're needing to apply when you do the target on your own. So yeah, I can do these all you want. I can also meet for Google Meet. I know some of you guys have already done an individual Google Meet with me, and we can go through practice examples together. So whatever it is that you guys want, let me know. Yeah, I love you guys, and I'll zoom out right here if you want to pause and use it as like an answer key. But yeah, I love you so much. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you, however I can support you in any way possible. Love you. Goodbye.